In this fourth part of our sequence on how to fit exercise activity into a busy routine, we look at some personal incentives and benefits and how to track and monitor your progress and give you some key coaching techniques that will help you when you need to kind of raise the game and focus more on getting some faster, quicker results. So first of all, important, I think, to have your individual benefits, incentives very clear. So it goes without saying, I think we all think that exercise activity is good for us. But what does that mean beyond it's good for us? I think having this list that says, if I get active, if I stay fit, I have more energy, I can manage stress better, my weight management is much more effective and straightforward, I can think more clearly, I'm more creative, it's a good time to spend with my family, it's quality time, I'd be a good role model to my children, my friends, my colleagues. All of these things stack up in the positive column and prevent us from making any excuses or prevent us allowing other people to steal our time. The reason we focus on people gathering lots of benefits is that it's not always just a simple take it or leave it, will I, won't I, exercise today type discussion in the head, because we're often letting people steal time, or we're very used to reprioritizing and putting others first and putting ourselves and our exercise fitness needs on the back burner. It kind of feels like it's a little bit uneven. So we might need one or two or maybe three or more positive reasons, incentives, benefits that we can quickly call to mind that will be the difference between bumping what we'd like to do and keeping it in the schedule, or making a plan B to make sure that it happens at some point today or tomorrow or in the not too distant future. But the difference between getting to the end of the week, having kept the things we want to do in the schedule rather than having removed them. So you can brainstorm your own list, and then we'd suggest that you write it down, keep it somewhere handy, and just keep referring back to it, because those incentives will be the difference that keep you on track. It's also useful to gather some data. So you can use different fitness apps, maybe Strava for activity, MyFitnessPal for logging your food routine, Headspace and Calm are both great for creating space for mindfulness, meditation, and if you will have an alcohol drinking related objective, you can track your, there are apps for everything that you would like to change. So whether you use the apps or whether it's wearable technology or you're using some element of social media as accountability, we highly suggest that you gather the data, and it comes in predetermined formats. But be honest with yourself. If you're logging, if you're noticing, if you're observing patterns, think about what's actually happening. This is great for building up the reality. And then the question when you do your regular reviews is, how does this reality reflect what I would like for the future? Is this how I would like to continue operating? You will see from the data that you gather patterns, routines that you might want to get in amongst and tinker and tweak and think about how you can change things moving forwards. But the beauty of having the evidence of what's going on is that it makes highlighting what you would like to change much more efficient. Then we'd suggest that you take the key elements of all the data that you're gathering from whatever mechanism and create your version of this kind of routine. So this is an example, not necessarily the definitive answer, but a framework, gathered information from wearable technology for activity. There's resting heart rate info, daily steps, some other KPIs. So once someone has an idea of what constitutes their good exercise and activity routine, what leaves them feeling effective, focused, performing well, being able at the end of the week to tick the box, we suggest you kind of hold this in your line of sight and just check in regularly. So this could be a routine, a version of this that you would aim for. You check in every 7 days, it might be slightly different, but you know what you're aiming for, and it doesn't need to be perfect every time. But I think what we observe with people that we work with, if you have an idea of where you're headed, it's much more likely to happen. So you know what good looks like, you know what you need to do to organize yourself in the week to put the structures in place. You might also notice that at certain times, so in this instance, this is an example, the right hand column of a 7-day period over Christmas. In this template, it's quite different. There's little exercise, there's less sleep, there's fewer daily steps. But when checking in with these kind of information algorithms, you will see there's no activity that would normally exist. That's quite clear. But also what you then notice is that things like resting heart rate jump up suddenly. Stress level algorithm increases quite a chunk. So it's another kind of, not necessarily a wake-up call, but just a reminder of how the change in how we structure each week can affect itself in ways that we might not realize. Then knowing what good looks and feels like. If you look at this and you're not quite so pleased with some of the numbers, you know what you need to do to very quickly put things back in practice, in place, to get back to the ideal. So kind of, if you are kind of deviating, I'm not going to say falling off the wagon, but deviating from what your ideal is, and that's fine, and that's part and parcel of life. But what we find is, if maybe someone wanders off track at Christmas and it takes them a while to get things back on track through January and consistently into February, if you have this crystal clear focus on what success is for you, you can just bring that back into play immediately and get back on track, and you feel back in control of the whole thing. So structures, data, targeted changes, and then building up this framework of what works for you so you can just follow it on a regular basis. Always a great way to keep things in place, short, medium, and long term. So the other thing beyond some of the practicalities, the coaching skills, the coaching techniques, it's mostly about asking yourself questions to give different input and different ideas. So if you were working with a coach around your fitness, they would want to get under the skin. If your objectives were on the face of it to get fit, tone up, lose weight, they would then ask you, when do you want to experience these things? What happens once you have experienced that thing? What's step 2 in the process? That sometimes gives people a little bit extra impetus to get on with step 1. Once you break things down into what you're going to do, how do you get started quickly as possible? Doing your first exercise routine might be the first step. What's the first element of that? Well, diarising it, planning what you're going to do, clearing the way, adding accountability, telling other people, that might be an even smaller step. So just breaking your goals down with these different questions, but also, again, reminding yourself of what the benefits are. I think the key, and these are just some suggested questions, the key is, if something is blocking you, think of an alternative. Ask yourself the opposite question. Can you challenge yourself from a different way that's going to give you new input, new information that will help you overcome whatever the perceived blockage is at the time? Something that people often respond to well, they'll say they want to do something, but it's not actually happening. You can challenge them, or you can challenge yourself. Well, if it's not happening, just take it off the table. Just remove it from your to-do list. Focus your efforts on something else. And sometimes the very idea of removing that, if you take away the option for someone to get fit, to do more exercise, suddenly they start to cling on to it a little bit more keenly and think, okay, no, I don't want you to remove that from my list of possibilities. Therefore, this is how I'm going to get started with it sooner rather than later. So either by suggesting to take it off the table gives us some new incentive, or even if we just push it down the timeline a bit further, sometimes people, I don't want to wait 10 years for results with my fitness. So I'm going to make sure that I start right now. Again, it starts you thinking in a slightly different way. We would always challenge people by saying, what's stopping you? To which the response is often, I'm lazy. It's easier just not to bother, just do things that I do as they are, stay as things are. It's often not that. I think challenge that question as well. Is it easier? Well, it might feel easier not to do a workout now, but is it actually easier to live with the guilt and the frustration that often people give themselves for not putting their exercise routine into place? So it's worth challenging from that angle. And then the other thing that's worth exploring, I think, is, if we're waiting, if it's not happening right now, what are we waiting for? Often there will be a better time in future, a more appropriate opportunity. But in many cases, it doesn't arise. I think the only way to make sure that the future is better is to take some instant action today, to experiment, to try a few things, to start refining the plan for what's going to work for you immediately. So on the subject of questions, they talk about limiting beliefs when it comes to exercise. This is usually the most common one. I want to exercise more, but I don't have time. Once more, this is about questions. If you did have time to exercise, what would you do with that time? Actually, how much time do you need for exercise? through the day, through the week, through the month? These questions and all the others on this list give you more thought. Would you have time in the future? When might you have time? It gives you some more options. And then the question at the bottom, why do you even want to make time? Which takes us back to the benefits and the incentives. And that starts making it a little bit more real. If I make time, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have more energy. I'll have more focus. I'll be a happier person. This gives me the impetus to get going. Last word on coaching techniques. We talk to people a lot about visualization. So it is possible to make your track through exercise slightly more straightforward by just taking the time to kind of visualize you as a fit person. How does that feel? What do others say about you? How is that reflected in you as a role model? Kind of building up the picture, using all your senses of you as with a great positive fitness identity. One word of caution here: when you're visualizing, visualize what you would like to happen in its entirety. Now, we say that because often when we're encouraging people to use this technique, they'll visualize a gym routine, a run plan, sports with other people, and almost immediately once they visualize that, they start visualizing the things that will get in the way, the reasons why this hasn't worked in the past, the other people that prevent them from bringing this visualization into reality, which is fine. That kind of notion of being aware of these things means that you need to consider them, but then you take a step back and you pause again, and then you visualize moving around those things. You visualize the end product. You visualize getting to the end of that week having achieved everything you want to do. So visualization is a very powerful tool. We just must be careful how we use it. You must visualize precisely the outcomes you want and not re-visualize things not happening in the way that you would like them. It's a subtle difference, but it's a difference that makes a big difference when you get the technique correct. So the last part, broken 12 simple strategies for long-term fitness results. It's about being proactive. It's about thinking carefully with what you specifically want to achieve, why it matters, being organized, holding yourself as a priority, creating some sort of momentum. Once you get started and it's working, the thing will snowball, and having a balanced routine across weeks, months, and years in the future. And if ever it needs more attention, you just pause, you review, you break things down into the smallest possible steps, and then you get active as quickly as you can. So take charge, take control, decide what you want, be clear about how you're going to get it, take steady action, consistent action, and your fitness routine will stay in place forevermore.